king of German mercenaries.
Chapter 185, Growing Herbs in a Glass Greenhouse. The two Mongolian doctors seemed to have poor language skills. What made Marin most frustrated was that the two guys could speak Mongolian and Russian, which was popular in Eastern Europe, but not German. Since being recruited by the Teutonic Empire, the two did learn some German, but they only learned a few words for greeting. Then, their communication with Marin was basically based on simple German words and gestures. One day, Marin was really tired of communicating with the two Mongolian doctors using gestures, and thought that they were from Mongolia and might know Chinese, so he spoke Chinese. Unexpectedly, the two actually knew how to speak Chinese. However, the Chinese they spoke sounded like the dialect of the north of Essex, probably the accent of Datong. No wonder, the tribes of Morigen and Bader were originally close to Datong. They often sent people with horses to Datong to do business in exchange for iron pots, tea, etc. Therefore, many children of noble families in the tribe learned the Datong dialect to facilitate trade. At this moment, their Datong dialect Chinese finally came in handy. Fortunately, Datong dialect and Mandarin both belong to northern dialects, and there are still many similarities. Therefore, as long as he spoke slowly, Marin could still communicate with these two Mongolian doctors who spoke Datong dialect. If they spoke GD dialect, Marin would be at a loss. Because GD dialect and Mandarin are too different. Even though he had listened to a lot of Cantonese songs in his previous life, Marin still didn't know what those Cantonese singers were singing without looking at the subtitles. After some communication, Marin was finally able to communicate with the two guys. To be honest, if a patient and a doctor cannot communicate normally one day, it would be tragic. The doctor always asks about the patient's condition, and the patient speaks in a dialect. After a long time, the doctor does not understand a word. How can he treat the patient? Fortunately, after speaking Mandarin, Marin became the first person on the island who could communicate normally with the two Mongolian doctors. But it was useless because Marin was a lord, not a translator. If these two guys were to treat someone else and couldn't communicate, it would be terrible. In addition, the Mongolian doctors' treatment methods were simple and rough. If they didn't understand the condition and used the wrong and rough methods to treat it, they might kill the patient. So, in desperation, Marin had to teach them to speak German himself, which was a miserable mess. At the beginning, when someone on the island came to them for treatment, Marin had to act as a translator. Thinking about it, Marin was almost depressed. As a baron, he actually served as an interpreter for two Mongolian doctors. It was too embarrassing. However, when Marin was teaching the two to learn German, they often chatted. One day, Bartel suddenly said that his surname was Li, and he brought a lot of seeds of oriental medicinal herbs. Marin was so shocked that he broke the glass wine glass imported from Venice. What did you say? Medicinal seeds? How many? Ah. Bartel didn't expect Marin to react so strongly and was stunned for a moment. Don't just stand there, answer my question. Oh, just a few small packets, with a dozen seeds of each variety. I collected the seeds purely out of curiosity. I originally planned to plant them in the Golden Horde. What are they? Tell me quickly. Oh, the main ones are astragalus, buplurum, dandelion, siler, ephedra, licorice, gentian. Well, before coming from my hometown, I also collected some Artemisia annua on the grassland. Most people don't eat this stuff, it's for livestock. Ah. Artemisia annua. Who would have thought that after hearing the name of Artemisia annua, Marin was so surprised that he almost jumped up. Sir, have you heard of Artemisia annua? In our place, this thing is called stinking wormwood, it tastes very bad, and most people don't eat it for medicine. Of course, of course. Ma Lin thought to himself. Several hundred years later, a great Chinese man named Tu Yuyu extracted artemisinin from Artemisia annua and won the Nobel Prize. If Bartel hadn't mentioned the word stinky wormwood, Marin might have wondered if they brought the kind of Artemisia annua he needed to extract artemisinin. Note, the stinky wormwood used to extract artemisinin is actually called Artemisia annua. It is also called Artemisia annua in traditional Chinese medicine, but it has nothing to do with the plant whose scientific name is Artemisia annua in later generations. But when he heard the word stinky wormwood, he felt relieved. Why is Marin so excited? Because artemisinin is a miracle drug for treating malaria, even better than quinine. Moreover, artemisinin is easy to source. Because Artemisia selingensis is a perennial herb that can grow in 1 year and then extract its medicinal ingredients. Quinine is extracted from the bark of the cinchona tree. However, the cinchona tree needs to grow for 6 or 7 years before the bark can be peeled and the quinine is boiled. The period of effect is very long. Unlike Artemisia scoparia, it can be planted and harvested in the same year, and it is very convenient to expand the planting. As for its use value, the most important one is the treatment of malaria. Marin lived in Europe, where malaria was less likely to occur. However, once he colonized tropical areas, malaria became the #1 disease. These days, most deaths of sailors on ships are caused by scurvy, while most colonists in tropical areas die of malaria. So, having a drug to fight malaria could also make tropical islands safer to develop. With Artemisia scoparia, Marin had enough confidence to conquer tropical areas and plant sugarcane. Otherwise, even if he did, many people would die. Generally, if half of the 10 people who went to the tropics to colonize survived, it was considered good. In order to adapt to the tropical climate, the colonists had to go to Africa to capture black slaves to work, because black people were more adaptable to the tropical climate than white people. Marin was even more surprised by what was to come. What are these herbs used for? Marin asked, pointing to the dandelions, windproof plants and gentian that he had never seen before. Astragalus, buplurum, ephedra and licorice are all very common herbs, and Marin also knows their uses. However, he has never come into contact with Sanguisorba officinalis, Sapochnikovia divaricata and Gentiana scabra. After all, his level of Chinese medicine is not even half-baked. Therefore, he naturally does not know some less used herbs. When Batel told Marin that burdock was used to stop bleeding and reduce swelling, Marin was so happy. It is also because he did not study Chinese medicine professionally in his later generations and did not know the role of Sanguisorba officinalis. Because, in later generations, people basically used Yan Baiyao, which mainly used Panax noto ginseng as the main medicine, to stop bleeding and reduce swelling. Because Yan Baiyao is very powerful, Panax noto ginseng also greatly overshadowed the brilliance of Sanguisorba officinalis. Therefore, it is normal that Marin did not know Sanguisorba officinalis. As for the windproof herb that dispels wind and relieves exterior symptoms, relieves dampness and relieves pain, and the gentian that clears heat and dampness, relieves liver and calms nerves and treats hair loss, Marin doesn't pay much attention to it. Because these diseases are actually rare. However, it seems that many middle-aged people in Europe have the problem of hair loss. Maybe gentian is still useful. Among these herbs, the ones that Marin valued the most were probably Artemisia scoparia and Sanguisorba officinalis. Because one was used to treat malaria, and the other could be used as a wound medicine, both of which were very useful for colonial expansion. Ephedra was also a good herb for treating colds, and buplurum was also used to reduce fever. Therefore, Marin made a fortune this time. To this end, in order to grow this important herb, Marin decided to build a glass greenhouse to grow and protect these herbs. Because it is now mid to late April, and the spring planting season has passed. However, these herbs are so important. Therefore, Marin decided to build a glass greenhouse to grow these herbs. Of course, a glass greenhouse is not needed in spring, summer and early autumn. It is only in late autumn that a glass greenhouse is needed because the weather starts to get cold at that time, which can easily freeze these precious herbs to death. Chapter 186, Training and Preparation for War. Although it was decided to use a glass greenhouse to cultivate oriental medicinal materials, there was no rush for this matter, because the temperature was quite high at the moment and there was no need to use a greenhouse. Moreover, Marin was also short of conditions. Because, although he brought back 50 glass craftsmen from Venice last time, he lacked an important raw material for making glass, soda. Soda is a very important raw material for making glass, because the main material of glass, quartz sand, has a melting temperature of 1700 to 2000 degrees without soda. If soda is added, the melting temperature will drop to about 1000 degrees, and a wood stove can also make it. At present, Venetians use wood-fired stoves to burn glass. Actually, there is no other way. Although coal stoves burn glass at higher temperatures, there are no coal mines in Italy. In Britain, there were many coal mines, but the glass industry was not well developed, and the benefits of burning glass with coal had not yet been discovered. It was not until the 17th century that the British discovered that burning glass with coal was better. In Marin, there is no shortage of coal, and quartz sand can also be bought. But soda is very scarce. Soda is generally produced in the desert areas of West Asia and North Africa. Because soda is sodium carbonate, it is easily soluble in water. Europe has a humid climate, so there is a natural lack of natural soda. Only the saline lakes in the desert are rich in this stuff. The Phoenicians who first discovered glass were people living in Lebanon on the eastern coast of the Mediterranean. They are close to the desert, so it is not difficult to get natural soda. Now, because the Venetians controlled the Mediterranean, it was not difficult for them to buy natural soda in the Middle East. As for other parts of Europe, if they wanted to make glass, they could only rely on alchemists to extract soda ash from wood ash. Not only was the quantity small, but the price was also very high, which also led to high costs for glass manufacturing in limited scale. The subsequent decline of the Venetians was not only due to the seizure of their business by the two Turks, but also due to the blockade by the Ottoman Turks. The Ottoman Turks would occupy Egypt 20 years later, and Egypt was currently an important source of natural soda for Venice. Once the Turks blocked it, the Venetians had a hard time doing business. Later, they finally invented a glass mirror to save their business, but the technology was stolen by the French. Therefore, without the technology, the maritime trade was robbed, and the natural soda production area was occupied by the Turks. Venice's business inevitably declined. As a college student in the future, Marin also studied chemistry in middle school and knew the hose combined alkali production method. However, this was useless because Marin could not obtain a large amount of ammonia, one of the most important raw materials in the hose alkali production method. Synthetic ammonia is a 20th century technology that requires top-level industrial equipment to produce. Marin also knew about the Rubin process, but using the Rubin process required a lot of investment and specialized chemical talent. There is nothing to worry about when investing in Marin. The most critical issue is the lack of chemical talent to control the reaction. Therefore, this can only be shelved for the time being. Of course, it doesn't mean that Marin will stop making glass. But, this matter needs to wait. After a while, Marin will send people to Venice to buy cheap natural soda produced in the Middle East. Buy a lot at a time, enough for 1 or 2 years. However, that matter is not urgent. What Marin is most anxious about now is the problem of training soldiers. The 2,500 soldiers were all trained. However, Marin recruited another 2,500 soldiers in the past few months, bringing the total to 5,000. Moreover, Marin suddenly wanted to cheat and not return the 1,000 Frisian prisoners of war he had captured. Anyway, the 9 Frisian nobles who fled to the Principality of Guedes were now extremely poor and had no money to feed these 1,000 people. Therefore, Marin planned to use them as cannon fodder to join the team attacking East Frisia. In this way, Marin could gather 6,000 troops, and even if he faced East Frisia head-on, there would be no big problem. In particular, among the 1,000 Frisian prisoners of war, there were 200 heavily armored swordsmen who were very good at charging and street fighting, and were suitable for leading the charge. Of course, there were many problems. The main problem was that the 2,500 new recruits and 1,000 Frisian prisoners of war were all lacking in training. Although the Frisian prisoners of war were all veterans, they were veterans of the feudal army of the old era with poor military discipline, while Marin's army was a modern army with strict military discipline. Marin was confident in training the 2,500 new soldiers recruited from the German countryside into a new army, but he was less confident in training the 1,000 Frisian prisoners of war. Because those people are all veterans, they have their own ideas and concepts of war. When Marin goes to train them, they may not listen. Therefore, Marin thought about it and decided to use strict military law to discipline and restrain the 1,000 Frisian prisoners. Anyway, under the pressure of 2,500 Texel veterans, the group of people would have to think twice before resisting. So, under Marin's arrangement, the smartest of the original 2,500 veterans were selected to train the 2,500 new recruits and 1,000 Frisian prisoners of war. Among them, the veterans who went to train the Frisian prisoners of war were all people with strong auras. Because, facing a group of veterans, they lacked auras and were easily passive. Moreover, Marin also set up a military court for the first time, and placed the military court sticks directly beside the training ground, ready to beat them at any time. The establishment of the military court made the already well-behaved recruits even more obedient, and basically no troublemakers dared to make trouble. As for the 1,000 Frisian veterans, some troublemakers did stand up to resist, but they were soon stripped of their pants and beaten with military sticks. Even if the group of veterans wanted to cause trouble, they had to look at the 2,000 Texel veterans standing by. Marin arranged 500 veterans to help with the training, while the other 2,000 people, all fully armed, stood by and watched coldly. In fact, this group of people came to calm the situation and prevent the Frisian veterans from causing trouble. Seeing the 2,000 murderous veterans, the Frisian veterans, who only had training sticks in their hands, could only swallow their anger. Even if they wanted to resist, they had to see if they could beat the 2,000 killers next to them. The training methods for the 2,500 new recruits and the 1,000 Frisian prisoners of war were different. Because, for the 2,500 new recruits, Marin planned to organize them into 2 Spanish phalanxes, which required the use of a large number of muskets. The 1,000 Frisian prisoners of war were trained according to the requirements of the cold weapon troops. Because they were also cannon fodder soldiers responsible for the charge. Marin could foresee that the battle in Emden, the capital of East Frisia, would be a brutal street fight. The 1,000 heavily armored swordsmen of East Frisia were no pushovers. If the enemy's heavy armored swordsmen accidentally rushed into the group of musketeers, it would be a disaster. Facing the fierce heavy armored swordsmen, the musketeers with little melee ability would definitely suffer heavy losses and might even lose their composure. The purpose of the 1,000 Frisian prisoners of war was to hold off the heavily armored swordsmen of East Frisia. Then, the musketeers under Marin could hide behind them and shoot at leisure. Even if the heavily armored swordsmen wore breastplate armor, so what? In front of the musket, a knight in full plate armor would have to kneel. Of course, there was another very complicated project that made Marin very puzzled. That was the problem of coordinated and unified command of the 4 large phalanxes. Before, Marin only commanded 1 phalanx, which was naturally simple. Changing to 2 phalanxes, the command was not complicated. 2 phalanxes, 1 on the left and 1 on the right, would be enough. But if we change it to 4 square formations, it will be a bit troublesome. Because the deployment of the 4 square formations has become a big problem. For example, on the battlefields of this era, the battle formations were generally divided into 3 wings, left, center, and right. If there were 3 square formations, it would be easy to arrange. But Marin didn't know where to put the extra square formation. Because he had never commanded a large army in battle. After thinking about it, Marin suddenly thought of the legendary reserve. Since the beginning of modern warfare, people seem to. The role of the reserve is very important. For example, if the left wing of our side is defeated by the enemy, if we do not rescue it in time, the enemy may tear a big hole in it, causing chaos in the formation and leading to a total rout. However, neither the right wing nor the main force in the middle is suitable for rescue, because as long as the middle or right wing sends people to rescue, their own defense will be greatly reduced, and the enemy may take advantage of the opportunity to break through. Therefore, the best rescue force is actually the reserve team. The reserve team has no mission. If they see that one side is in trouble, they will go to replenish it. Moreover, if one wing of the enemy can't hold on, the reserve team can also be pulled out to increase the output and defeat the part of the enemy that can't hold on. Thinking of this, Marin finally established the arrangement of the 4 Spanish phalanxes. The oldest phalanx, commanded by himself, sat in the middle. The second veteran phalanx, commanded by Schwartz, was responsible for the left wing. Then, from the 2 newly recruited phalanxes, a better phalanx was selected and commanded by Frundsberg, responsible for the right wing. And Marin had not yet decided who would lead the last phalanx. However, it was a reserve team that could be used for support at any time. As for the 1,000 Frisian prisoners of war, Marin only planned to train them in street fighting skills. Because, after defeating East Frisia, Marin planned to return them to the Frisian nobles and let them fight with the Duke of Saxony, and it would be best if he could turn West Frisia upside down. Chapter 187 Simplified Armor. The 1,000 Frisian prisoners seemed to have accepted their fate and no longer resisted the officer's strict discipline requirements. However, as the highest commander of these prisoners, Sivag seemed to have realized that Marin wanted to use these 1,000 people as cannon fodder. Therefore, the former Frisian general Sivag, who was stranded on Texel Island as an important prisoner, took the initiative to find Marin. "My Lord Baron, are you going to make a big move?" Marin was stunned for a moment. "How do you know? Isn't it obvious? The tiny Wadden Islands need 5,000 soldiers to protect them. Also, my 1,000 men have also been trained. It seems that they are being trained as cannon fodder." Really smart. Marin was not worried about Sivag's nonsense. Because the Wadden Islands were isolated from the outside world, and Texel Island only opened up trade between Thurench and the outside world, and other areas were forbidden to outsiders. Therefore, even if Sivag wanted to spread the news, he had to go to the island. "Sir, do you still want to seize Friesland? I don't think you have the ability to defeat the Duke of Saxony." According to Sivag's understanding, Marin was still obsessed with Friesland. However, Sivag was right. In terms of background, Marin could not compete with the Saxon family. "I didn't say I wanted to seize Friesland." Marin spread his hands. "If it's not Friesland, could it be East Frisia?" Sivag quickly thought of it. Because it is not easy for Marin to take action in the surrounding areas, except for East Frisia. Apart from anything else, the Netherlands was the family territory of Maximilian I, Marin's master. Marin certainly could not move arbitrarily, and he did not have the confidence to compete with the Habsburg family. As for the Frisian region, it had been occupied by the Duke of Saxony. The Duke of Saxony was no weaker than the Emperor, including the entire Saxon family. As for the Principality of Gettys, it is also a powerful country and is not easy to mess with. As for the Archbishopric of Utrecht, it is a subordinate of the Holy See. In today's world without the Reformation, anyone who dares to annex the Archbishopric must be tired of living. Well, after thinking about it, there are only the East Frisian state and the Oldenburg state in the east. However, the Oldenburg state is not easy to mess with. Although this state is average in strength, its relatives are powerful. For example, the powerful Danish king Hans belonged to the House of Oldenburg and was of the same clan as the Count of Oldenburg. If Marin dared to annex the earldom of Oldenburg, Denmark would most likely send troops to intervene. Today's Denmark is not the small Denmark of later generations with only tens of thousands of square kilometers of land, but the only powerful country in Northern Europe. Norway and Sweden are all under the control of Denmark, forming the Kalmar Union. Therefore, Marin would not have the idea of fighting Denmark alone, nor would he attack the county of Oldenburg, which was too powerful. Then, the only possibility was the county of East Frisia, which was regarded as a barbarian by the Germans. The Frisians are an alternative to the Germans. They are independent, strong-willed, and love great voyages. They are quite different from people in other parts of Germany. Moreover, although the county of East Frisia swore allegiance to the Holy Roman Emperor and officially became a vassal state, the empire did not consider East Frisia as its own. Even in the imperial noble parliament, there was no seat for the county of East Frisia. You know, within the empire, it's understandable that a baron cannot enter the imperial parliament, but for an earl with a territory, not being able to participate in the imperial parliament is pure discrimination. Even Emperor Maximilian I did not really regard the county of East Frisia as a vassal state, but rather as a barbarian chieftain. Therefore, in 1516, Maximilian I forced Count Edisard I of East Frisia to hand over the inheritance of the county to the Duke of Saxony. Of course, the joint forces of the Emperor and the Duke of Saxony failed in that military operation. But it is undeniable that the Empire did not really take the county of East Frisia seriously. At the beginning, if the Oldenburg county in the Frisian noble republic around East Frisia were not weak, and the bishopric of Munster was not absolutely sure that it could swallow it, East Frisia would have been coveted by others. Sure enough, after the Duke of Saxony swallowed West Frisia, he set his sights on East Frisia. Although East Frisia is difficult to deal with at the moment, Sivag believes that with Marin's cunning and treacherous ability in command and combat capabilities, taking over East Frisia may not be a particularly difficult task. However, as the former highest military commander of East Frisia's neighbor West Frisia, Sivag was well aware of East Frisia's war potential. He knew that East Frisia could mobilize thousands of troops, and that the main force of East Frisia's standing army was 1,000 heavy armored swordsmen, also known as straw hat swordsmen. My Lord Baron, it is quite difficult to attack East Frisia. I know, so I prepared 6,000 people. Marin said nonchalantly. Sivag was one of the prisoners, without personal freedom, so there was no need to worry about him saying anything. The 1,000 people I accepted were abandoned. I'm not abandoning you, but your 200 heavy armored swordsmen must lead the charge. My army lacks a powerful force like heavy armored swordsmen that can lead the charge. What about the other 800 people? Just follow those 200 people and provide some cover or something. Sir, can I ask you a favor? Go ahead. I know that these 1,000 people will definitely charge in the front, and casualties are inevitable. But, can you equip the other 800 people with some armor? Armor? Sivag, it's not that I don't want to equip them. But heavy armored swordsmen are all strong soldiers. Otherwise, ordinary soldiers wouldn't be able to run after wearing armor. What about the mail and chain mail? They risk their lives to rush to the front, they can't be without any protection, right? This is a problem. Marin began to think. Hey. Got it. Marin suddenly slapped his thigh and thought of a suitable armor. Just now, Marin remembered that in order to reduce the weight of the armor, the Spaniards removed the armor behind their backs and only kept the armor in front of their bodies. This method not only greatly reduces the weight of the armor, but also tells the soldiers a message: if you have no armor on your back and turn around to run away, you are more likely to die. Marin certainly didn't want to directly adopt the front half armor promoted by the Spanish in the 16th century, but he wanted to make another discount, directly use the three-quarter breastplate of the front. That is, the two iron plates of the three-quarter breastplate worn by the cuirassiers were compressed into only one iron plate, with only the front chest having armor, but not the back. A complete three-quarter breastplate weighs 8 kilograms, while a three-quarter breastplate with only the chest iron plate weighs only 4 kilograms. Such a weight is bearable even for ordinary soldiers. As for how to equip the iron plate on the chest, Marin naturally has a way: just ask the tailor to sew a vest with leather or linen. There is a huge pocket in the front of the vest to hold the iron plate. This vest can also be a white vest with a black cross. Normally, when there is no war, the iron plate in the big pocket on the vest's chest can be taken out and kept. Once a war breaks out, the iron plate will be carried by vehicles during the march. Before the battle, everyone lines up to receive the iron plate and puts it in the big pocket on the chest for defense. Of course, this was not Marin's invention. Marin had seen on TV that many special police officers wore bulletproof vests that were made of steel plates in leather jackets. Of course, the special police officers used modern ultra-high-strength alloy steel plates. However, the new simplified armor that Marin designed for his men was made of iron plates. However, because the long-range weapons of this era are far less destructive than the hot weapons of later generations, even iron plates can withstand many attacks and even save lives. Moreover, Marin also decided to add a mask to the original iron helmet that imitated the steel helmet of later generations to enhance the frontal protection. Moreover, this mask is movable and can be pulled up to reveal the face at ordinary times. It only needs to be pulled down in wartime. However, such a mask can only block ordinary bows and arrows, and is definitely useless against muskets. However, it can at least give the warriors a lot of confidence and strengthen their courage. So, the iron helmet with a movable mask and the iron plate on the chest of the white vest with a black cross became the simplified armor newly launched by Marin. Of course, this is what ordinary soldiers wear. Elite soldiers, the kind used for assault, still have to wear a full 3/4 breastplate with both front and back. The simplified armor is actually for soldiers who are not strong enough to save their physical energy. It is not that Marin deliberately cut corners. Marin assured Sivag on the spot that he would equip all his men with this simplified version of armor, which finally satisfied Sivag. He did not mean that Marin took care of those prisoners of war, but that if those prisoners of war were more resistant, then the protection of Marin's musketeers would be more in place. By then, your odds will be even greater. Moreover, this simplified version of armor is very simple, resulting in low cost and easy to be equipped on a large scale. Even if the helmet is equipped with a movable mask, it is a little troublesome, but the cost is not very high. For military equipment to be equipped on a large scale, the lower the cost, the better. Of course, the quality cannot be too bad. Otherwise, it will affect the combat.